My printer chooses now to start printing. Hello and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us again today. Sandy, how's it going?
I'm fantastic. You?
Very good. Very, very good. Yeah, we have a lot of exciting things going on and an excellent guest to talk to today. But first, we just want to remind everybody to go over to our website, breakthrough.reipodcast.ca. There you can download all of the episodes of the show that we've done. Listen to all the guests, get in touch with all of the guests through the show notes and the links there for all of their exciting things that they have going on as well. So there's lots you can do. So I recommend you go over and check out our website, breakthrough.reipodcast.ca, and they can get our free gift there as well.
Absolutely. The ultimate strategy for building wealth through real estate. If they sign up for a list there, you'll get that, but you'll also get on our email list. Everyone knows the drill now. You'll get on the email list to hear about all the tours we're doing, all the webinars, live events maybe someday, things like that. So you'll also never miss out on a show because you'll get some email updates as they come out and a whole bunch of other stuff there. So keep in touch with us that way. Go jump on our email list there and you won't miss a beat.
Absolutely. And please go over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review there. Do the whole thing where you like and subscribe to us on Facebook and YouTube and all of that stuff. So, and leave us a review, please, if you would. That will really help us get out there and get the show known to more people. So we would really appreciate it if you would do that. Anything else we got to talk about, Sandy?
I don't know.
You doing anything?
Not really. Any what?
Events.
You know what? We do have an event coming up. If someone's watching this, we got a live event Thursday. So tomorrow evening, we're doing an event around strategies we use to invest in real estate. And, I think we're going to have a pretty big turnout this time. So tomorrow evening, I believe it's at 7:00. So if you're watching this, if you're listening, you'll be a little late, but if you're watching live, you'll be able to catch that. So you can find that where can they find that? Probably just look up Executive Properties Capital on Facebook. You'll find it on that group or McKay Realty Network. You'll find it there as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's get talking to our guest. Marc is joining us from Vancouver today. So we're really excited to have Marc with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, Marc, I'll do a quick intro here for Marc Robillard. Am I saying that right, Marc?
Yes. Very good.
Okay, awesome. He's a real estate investor. He's currently living in the Vancouver area, and he's got a whole bunch of stuff to share with us today. A lot around land assemblies. Marc's a passive income builder through real estate. He manages and operates Airbnbs. He builds shared housing communities, does land assemblies, repairs finances, whole bunch of stuff. He's done a wide range of things in the real estate world over his career. And he's also kind of interesting stuff, project manager on, I'm going to make sure I get this word, silviculture projects.
Yeah, that's a fancy word.
Yeah. And he specializes in training First Nations in remote areas, deal with mobilizing and training crews on inaccessible land by helicopter, boat, and bushwhacking through the forest. So pretty cool background, and really going to get into some of that stuff. A lot of land assembly conversation, I think, and we're really excited to have you on the show here, Marc. Thanks for being on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is going to be very confusing. We're going to have to. Well, I don't necessarily know that we need to stay focused, but you got a lot of stuff you can share with us today, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's. I was trying to run to my mind what would be interesting. I thought maybe I'd start with what I didn't do, which is one of my biggest regrets is, as you can tell from the accent, I'm a French Canadian, and I moved from La Belle Province in 1990. I came to plant trees for a summer, and I haven't gone back home yet. and in those days, I could see opportunity, but I was young and I didn't really know how to get started. And in my mind, I guess I come from a thrifty background, and I always thought I wanted to buy my piece of land cash, and I wanted to buy a piece of land in the Nelson area, which is the East Kootenays, beautiful area. And every year I'd go tree plant, work really, really hard, and put a little bit money aside, and then I'd be like, I thought, oh, I'll get closer to my goal, and I wanted to buy the land cash. I didn't want to have a mortgage. So every year, the price of land would go up faster than I could have savings. And so it took a while for me to catch on. This was not a good strategy. And I would listen to people that would, I guess, direct me in the wrong way. And they'd say, oh, real estate cycles, and it's gone up a lot, so it's going to come down, because it always goes up and down. So I kind of listened to that advice and just kept trying to accumulate money to get to buy the land. And I was just getting further and further and further from the goalpost. So I put that on the back burner and stopped looking for a while, and until I realized, okay, now I might have enough money to do the down payment, so I better pull the trigger because I'm not getting ahead. And that's how I bought my first piece of land.
The power of leverage.
The power of leverage, very powerful. And the first property was, it took me a really long time, because in 1990 already I wanted to buy something, but just procrastinated. And then I think the first property I bought was in 95 or 96. And the idea was, at that time, I didn't really have aspirations to be a real estate investor. I was happy planting trees. Silviculture, by the way, is a division of forestry, which is that has to do everything with growing trees. So everything that's done after logging. And that's what I was involved in, and still to this day do a little bit less and less every year. But anyway, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit. So I'll go back.
You tell us about that piece of property that you bought then with the 20% down. We'll talk about your first investment.
Yes, that's right. So I bought that in Pemberton, and it was 10 acres, and the idea was my job's seasonal, so I thought in the winter I'm gonna build something on it, and then I'll have a house. And I just basically sat on the land for 6 years, and I thought, oh, this is great. The land value is going up, but there was nothing to bring revenue. It was bare land. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make money here, because every year my neighbors would sell. I think in the days I bought it for 80 grand. And I went to the bank of mom to borrow the money, and or part of the money anyway. And I thought I would do well. And 6 years later, I sold it for 120. And I thought, oh, this is good. But if I actually had, my mom didn't charge me interest. So if I had paid interest, I would have made a zero. And after that, I started looking at other stuff. And that's 2003 is when it really started happening. And when I started, well, in my mind, was pulling big leverages. So I was looking either at, I was looking around, and wasn't sure where to buy or what to buy. Was trying to focus on two things, either multifamily. I was looking in Montreal, and I thought that was great opportunity. And I was also looking in Vancouver. And in the end, kind of funny story, I got in a bad accident, and I broke my neck in 2 places, and was unable to work, and decided to, that's when I really decided to pull the trigger to move ahead with real estate. So I had a good down payment, but I had no job. And I found a really creative way to talk to the banker and buy my first, basically, student housing, or it was a shared housing with friends. And that's when I can say I really started changing the course of real estate investing. And
so that is probably the least funny story I've ever heard, but but it got you into real estate investing. So I suppose that's good. You're okay now as well. So,
Yeah.
good.
Was that in Vancouver or was that in Montreal? That first one.
The first one, I ended up choosing Vancouver, and it was, so I bought the biggest house that I could in the best neighborhood that I could, and I ended up I saw friends that would actually, my girlfriend at the time had a tiny apartment downtown, and she was renting rooms, and I thought, oh wow, if you could do that on a bigger scale, you could do really well. So then we started playing with ratios. So price per square foot. So I noticed if you buy a big place, your price per square foot goes down. So I thought, okay, I'll do like her. So I filled the house with a whole bunch of people and really started house hacking, and that worked out really well. And then I got nervous because I was fairly highly leveraged. So we were trying to find ways to be a little bit less exposed to interest rates. I thought at the time interest rates would go up, but they ended up coming down, which was good. But I didn't know that because we had come from a history of really high interest rates, and so I thought they'll go back high. So I had a variable mortgage, and that was a big stress. So I thought, well, if I'm going to fail, I might as well fail big. So I bought a second house. And then I thought, wow, this is good. If things go right, I'll be able to retire one day, because with forestry, our incomes are not very big. It's a work of passion more than revenue. And yeah, it panned out well. I bought a second house, and I also did the student rental format in that one, which in my case was mostly travelers, and it worked out well. So the strategy there was to offset the potential variable mortgage going sideways. I locked in for actually a 10-year term. And then I thought, okay, well, they were both cash flow positive. So I thought if one goes a little bit negative, I'll still be okay. But things went really well, and the variable was the right pick to do by far.
That's good. Now tell us about the houses themselves. Were they close to the school? How many rooms are you putting in them? That kind of thing. Is there rules around that, or did you not really pay attention to that kind of thing at that time? Let's get into that.
Oh, yes. Well, that's very good questions. The first house I picked was it was in a neighborhood that really reminded me of Montreal, a quartier called Saint Denis. And when I was young, Saint Denis was it's very, very close to downtown, and it was not a, let's call it that way, was not a, it was an up and coming neighborhood. So there was, a lot of not very wealthy people, I guess, but a beautiful community, lots of artists, and you could see things were moving the right way and getting better. And in Montreal, I could see that happen that happened maybe 10 years before in Vancouver. So I really like East Vancouver. And I picked that neighborhood because it reminded me of Le Plateau Mont-Royal. And I could see the trend going up, and the prediction was good. It's so close to downtown that it's done very well. Gentrified, I guess. Yeah.
And then how many in the place, and is there rules around that?
Yes, there are rules around it. So the first place I had, it was an interesting format because it can be divided as a triplex, but I kind of wanted to have my cake and eat it too. So it had basically 3 kitchens and 3 separate suites. But with my lifestyle, we we're used to living in communities, and I really like that. So I wanted to share, well, I wanted to get access to my whole house and basically share it with friends. So that's basically what I did. And we, through the years, that house had very different, very variable formats, but at the max, I know we were at 12 at one point. And now it's more separated in that property is more separated in a kind of triplex. And the other house was a little bit about the same size, but it had more bedroom. The other house was really interesting because I was kind of chasing numbers for the other house. Was a good neighborhood as well, but was owned by a fellow who would take people that were on social assistance, and he had people everywhere. I never seen anything like that. But my vision was different, and I bought the house from him, and it had, I think, 14 rooms, but some people were staying in closets. It was terrible. And when I had it, the vision for that house was to get people that come for medium term. That's how I like to call it. And I like picking Europeans that would come for, let's say, 3 months to 2 years for internships, or so I'd rent it furnished and created a really nice community in there. So it was like-minded people that had shared accommodation, and I shrank the size from whatever how many people he had to 10. Yeah, and there are rules around it. I'm not totally kosher on all. I wasn't totally kosher on all aspects of what the city requires, but there are also rules as far as insurance, and I had to go with a commercial insurance, which is really, really expensive. Yeah, it wasn't at the time, but it seems the last 2 years it's gone very expensive. Yeah.
So you've got your fingers in a bunch of things here. So I think we're going to sort of shift over to the land assembly thing, because that's very interesting. So I think we should start off with just explain to people what that is.
So a land assembly is when you get a bunch of properties together to basically change the use. And so the use right now in that area is single family housing, and we were looking at selling to someone who wants to build higher density. And we've been in the process. I haven't done many. I'm working on one, and I'd really like to do more, and that deal is coming to a close, which is really nice. We have so a land assembly is basically exactly putting multiple properties together to build, in this case, going to be to build a higher density. So it'll go from single family homes to hopefully multiple story buildings. And right now, there's some lingo that comes with it. FSR is what's really one of the key points in our industry, and that means floor space ratio, and that's what's going to really change the value of your property. So if you buy a single family home, you're going to be able to build about, let's say you have a 3,000 square foot lot, you can build about a floor FSR of 0.75 roughly, depending what neighborhood you're in. So that means you can build about 3/4 of the size of your 3,500 square foot lot. I mean, it's a bit of a moving target, so they're kind of changing the FSR even if you don't do a land assembly. But if you do a land assembly, you can go to a 2, a 3, or a 5, and that real estate's really expensive. So if you can sell development height, it's extremely valuable. So you could double or triple or quintuple the value of your property by getting in a land assembly. Yeah.
And so what, I think that helps describe what it is. What attracted that to you? Why did you want to go into that world? And to me, I think what most people think is it sounds a little bit risky.
It's interesting because if you position yourself properly, like I found a property I could be on and be cash flow positive, and I just was paid to wait, basically. So it's like buying a stock that pays a good dividend, and then keep your fingers crossed that it's going to happen and get a big payoff. And yeah, it's sorry, can you repeat your question?
Well, let me just try and get a little more clear here. So did you buy multiple properties, or the company you're selling to is assembling the land so they can change the use? What is the idea?
Yes, I had one property, and my exit strategy from the moment I bought it was to from the moment I bought it, the strategy was to get in a land assembly, but I didn't know what I was getting in at the time. And it's it sure is a lengthy process.
So are you doing the land assembly, or is the company buying it from you doing the land assembly?
Originally, what we did is we tried to pick a realtor to assemble the land for us, and we had multiple failures. So that particular deal has been going on for about almost 4 years. And the realtor that I picked was she used to do residential, and she said, "Look, Marc, I feel better. I'll pass you on to this expert. That's what he does." So we picked the expert, and I personally, I really like that guy. He was really good, and he kind of started doing the assembly, and then there was trouble, which now I know is almost normal. Part of the block wanted more money, or they thought, well, my house has this and this, so I should get more than so and so. So what ended up happening is half the block got assembled, and and then our half, we had a deal. The deal fell apart. So then we were stuck. Somebody didn't really like that realtor, and there was a lot of conflict, headbutting. So we ended up not dealing with that realtor anymore. And after that, we brought on other realtors, and it was inching bit by bit for that deal moving forward. And the other realtors, the other realtor didn't have. The other realtor was really good as well, but I think my neighbors really didn't understand the FSR concept, and everybody had a different version or idea of what their property was worth, and so in the end, I ended up getting all the neighbors together, and together we all found a buyer. We all found a developer that's interested in our property. So to answer your question, I mean, we did it together. So we pulled the neighbors, and we did it together without a realtor.
How many properties are involved?
There's 10 properties involved. So the first five sold through a realtor, and then we were stuck with our 5 that was a bit more challenging to assemble. So it's going to be a big deal. They're going to go for about they're going to go upwards of $2 million a property. So the first guys that got in, the first guys that were bought off, they got 2.2 millions for their property. And it seems we're gonna get about the same deal.
And this is in Vancouver, like central, or what area of Vancouver is it?
This is in East Vancouver. So to go back to what Rob was saying, that property I picked because it was very close to the SkyTrain. Our SkyTrain's like the subway, the equivalent of your subway. And I had heard that they were gonna do a lot of development in those areas. The city was planning to increase density in areas close to the SkyTrain. Yeah.
So what were some of
Has
the biggest
impacted this at all? Out of curiosity,
Pardon?
has the COVID-19 pandemic, has that affected your deal at all?
You know, I thought it would, but it's really interesting. What's happening is in that deal hasn't been affected by it at all, which I was surprised, and I was also surprised, like because it seems like fundamentals are not going really well. Anyway, in Whistler, I don't want to go to Whistler yet, but I know my fundamentals in the Airbnbs in Whistler, that was struggling because we rely on international tourism. But it seems in Vancouver, with the whatever the money the government's giving, I forget the acronym, but a lot of the tenants anyway that I dealt with were receiving that money, and rent was coming in on time, and the property values are pretty stable. And actually we saw a little dip, it seems, from what I can see, and it's climbing back up. So we've been unaffected by COVID. Yeah.
So
although sorry, it's not totally true, because there's a big problem with the city is it's a very lengthy process for so we're basically in a contract right now, and we're subject to we were subject to approval, but the subjects actually got removed a couple of days ago, which things are kind of moving in the right way. It feels like I waited forever, but it seems everything's happening now. But for the developer, it's been a problem because we were subject for his approval, and nobody's kind of really pushing stuff forward right now because of COVID. And I've heard the same about multiple developers, is they're basically, their life is on hold because the city's not processing applications. So we thought we would be stuck waiting forever, but the developer really likes the site, and I think he started removing the subjects. So on July 29th, we're gonna get our first down payment, which is good.
I want to ask one more question. Sorry about this. Just because, I don't think a lot of people understand exactly how this works. So with the land assembly thing, you were sort of you looked at it after you had bought this place, maybe not for the land assembly, although, you're saying that you had it in mind, but then you looked around and you did a bunch of research, and you sort of spearheaded the idea of, hey, look, you went to all these people and said, if we get together and we assemble this land, then we can sell it to a developer and make a ton of cash, essentially. Like, are you the one that decided on that? You went around to all the neighbors and figured this out?
Yes, that's basically what happened. But the first way I did it is I used to be busy. Like 4 years ago, I was still really, really busy with forestry work. So but I could see my exit strategy was starting to happen just south of where we were. We were living beside the SkyTrain. Beside the SkyTrain used to be kind of industrial-ish land, which in Vancouver there's a shortage of. So what that meant, there was a Canadian superstore and a kind of shipping bay, and the shipping bay transformed to a high-tech center. And my neighbors kind of knew that I was a real estate investor, so they're like, "Oh, Marc, is this good or bad?" And I'm like, "This is good. This is moving the way we want. Like, it's going to increase the value of our property." And I said, when I bought this house, I was hoping for a land assembly, and I think we're moving in this direction. And that's already a few years back, and it slowly has. So yes, I did get to my neighbors, but then I got busy with work, so I hired a realtor to assemble it. So he started the ball rolling, and then because conflicts happened, unfortunately, that realtor, well, he sold half the block, so good on him. And then the other half was a bit more challenging, and there was headbutting between that realtor and one of the neighbors. So I think even if we had $10 million per property, one of my neighbors would not have signed on.
Yeah.
And it took such a long time and so much patience. And we'd have meetings at first, and we have one neighbor who's really nice. We've been using his home to meet, and when we'd go to his home, everybody was tight-lipped and didn't really want to share their strategy, or would just have an unrealistic number. They'd say, "Well, properties on Cambie Street are going for $5 million, so I want 5." And it's like, well, based on the FSR, you can't get 5, because on Cambie they're building 10-story buildings. Here we can't do a 10-story, so our price is going to be a bit less.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. You got to make everybody agree, and I'm sure that's pretty tough at some time. But I just want to tell everybody listening, you never know. You might have something like this. One of your properties might be sitting on a piece of land that would work for this kind of strategy. So maybe that's a cue for everybody to just take a look and see what kind of development's going on in the area, and if they can pull something like this together.
For sure.
Yeah, it's hard to it's something to keep in the back of mind when you're looking at every piece of real estate, right? Sometimes there's some hidden details or something in the land or the area that if you are aware of, you can find some deals that are maybe a bit hidden. What were the one or two biggest things then you learned from that whole process at this point? Is there one or two things that stands out in terms of next time going forward? I'm really glad I know this now.
Oh yeah, multiple. For one, be patient. Be patient and stay calm. It was such a roller coaster ride, because one day you're like, the property I bought, I actually paid like 450 grand, and then I can see someone wants to pay me 2.2 million for it. So imagine how excited you get, and then you're like, it's happening, and then it's like, oh, it's not happening. And then it's happening, and it's I guess you got to learn to be patient. And not get your emotions. It can be taxing. Even the happy moments are great, and then you get like, oh, no. Yeah,
so want to stay even keeled and not get too high or too low, I guess, through the process, because I could see that would be a bit stressful and just a roller coaster, like you said.
Yes, yeah, that's where it's good to be in a place where you're cash flow positive. So by being cash flow positive, it helps. You got to remind yourself, okay, well, I'm being paid to wait, but I want the big payout.
Well, after having the right, buying a property that's cash flow positive, which we always recommend, almost always, is it just helps you through the tough times, and ups and downs. It'll always carry you through, and you won't have hopefully as many issues. If you're buying and you were really just speculating and hoping that it's worth X amount in a bunch of years down the road, you're going to have, market adjustments, things like that come through, and you're going to feel the stress if you're not cash flow positive, right?
100%. Yes. Yeah. I think if I wasn't cash flow positive, I would have probably bailed, because that property I've owned since about, many years anyway. So it would get stressful for sure, more. Yeah.
So you also invest in Whistler, and you mentioned it, shorter term rentals at least. I think that'll be an interesting topic to go over here now a bit too, because that's been I'm sure pretty interesting through the last this COVID cycle and what's going on. I'm sure that's been affected. What originally made you decide to go up into that area and start investing in those types of properties?
That's a great question. I had a lot of equity. I was sitting on a lot of equity, and because my T4 was always really low, it was hard to get in places. So I ended up getting I was going to do another student type housing in Vancouver, and I got pre-approved for a mortgage. And at that time, the market in Vancouver was super hot, and I kept shopping, and then it's like, those numbers don't make sense. So I'm not much of a speculator, and so I decided to make my circle bigger. So I started looking more I call it the suburbs, but really, if you go to Burnaby, Surrey, Abbotsford, Chilliwack, it's you can barely tell there's a different city. It's just you're crossing another busy street. So it was very similar. I found places in Surrey that kind of worked, and the guys in the RAIN network were really buying there, and they liked it. So their strategy was to buy a house with a garage in the back and 2 units. So they'd have 3 units, and then they'd be cash flow positive. So I looked at these, and my girlfriend was like, why would you go to Surrey? Surrey gets bad rep. There's a bit of gang activity in Surrey, but that neighborhood was a really good one. So my girlfriend was like, don't go to Surrey, you're gonna get shot. I'm like, no, not in that neighborhood. And but it was not that appealing to me. So I just kept looking, and one day I'm up skiing and I take a chair with a young woman, and it's interesting. A chairlift ride in Whistler takes maybe 15-20 minutes, and at the bottom of the chair, she's very extroverted, so she was starting to tell what she did and why she was there, and that she had multiple properties. She had I believe 5 or 6 at the time. And I'm like, wow, good for you. So I'm like, how much did you pay for your property? How much rent do you get for it? And before I got to the top of that chairlift, I knew her realtor because the numbers worked. It was such a good deal. So I knew her realtor. I knew where she had her properties, and I contacted her realtor, and then I bought my first property there. And Airbnb was just starting at that time. So we just I didn't really want to use too much of my time. So I thought I'll try Airbnb on a small scale, and I bought in a complex that has a front desk, and they offer the service of full service package. So they were doing my cleaning, they were checking in the guests, they were finding the people to stay in there. So they call these, it's interesting in Whistler because you have 3 phases of condo ownership, phase 1, 2, 3. And a phase 3 is basically a timeshare. A phase 2 is where you are allowed to live in your condo only, I think it's a month out of the year, and then the rest of the time it has to be managed by the strata or the powers in place, and it's basically a glorified hotel room. And phase one is a condo that it's full on ownership condo, which is what I chose to go the route. But at first I had it managed under their management, and I was cash flow negative. And then Airbnb started picking up, and I really liked doing it. It was so much fun to see. It was so much fun to see people going to your place, having the time of their life, and paying you money, and you're doing great. So as time went on, I did more and more Airbnb, and at one point, I cut off the ties with the people who used to do it. So I self-manage it. I use their front desk, and now I built my own cleaning team, and that's working really well. So I went from being cash flow negative to being really cash flow positive.
Oh, that's interesting. So how much of your time, first of all, how many do you have now of those?
As of the day before yesterday, I had 2, and it's interesting because when I look at the Rain people, they like having many properties. I don't have very many properties, but they were really, well, I like to think they're really well managed, and they generated a lot of cash flow. And for your question, how much time did it take to manage?
Yeah,
I like to say about 2 hours a day, but you can do nothing for a while, and then one day you're gonna have a lot more work. So 2 hours is about what I'd say I spend. Yeah.
okay, fair enough.
So
Yeah.
how's that changed in the last few months? Has anything changed? Are you still excited about it as you were before the pandemic thing? And any adjustments that you've had to make through this process?
Yes, lots of adjustments. That got hit really hard by COVID, like really hard, because they actually closed our ski hill, our beautiful ski hill. They closed it. I think I was gone when they closed it, but when I came back, I was on a ski trip with friends, and I came back. It was like, oh my God, I left pre-COVID and I came back, and it was like being transported to another planet. And the ski hill closed, all my bookings got canceled. So it went from making, from making a lot, like in March, usually those will make a 1-bedroom condo will make about, between 5 and, let's say 8,000 would be a really good, but 6,000 is not. 6,000 would be what I was expecting. So, well, I guess it was more towards the end of March, but I did lose a few March bookings. April's not as good a month. I was expecting maybe 4 to 6 grand, and it went to basically almost zero. Maybe, yeah, because why are you going to go to Whistler if the ski hill's closed and you're in a pandemic? Like, I couldn't even get my ski buddies to come. I also backcountry ski, so I was going to get my ski buddies to come in the backcountry, and they were scared to get stopped by the police. So it really felt like we were under house arrest.
And so you put up until the day before yesterday or something like that. Did you sell one of them?
I did sell one of them, and that was I was just hovering back and forth, keep it, sell it, keep it, sell it. I sold basically my most beautiful one, and what I found is maybe at the peak it was probably worth 840, and the fundamentals are really down in Whistler. I mean, now I adjusted and am renting to more local people, but they don't really pay the same. So basically, fundamentals are down. I mean, we're up from what I was describing in April, but it's still not what it usually is, and it'll come back, you know. So, and I know that. So I listed it for 749, and within 2 weeks it gone for 745, and the day before yesterday I sold it for 745. So just this, I'm pretty happy about that deal. Everything worked out so well. So talk about having your cake and eat it too. So we'd use a property when we felt like it. It was rented. That one in particular made anywhere from 50 to 70,000 a year. I've owned it for since 2016, and I paid 405 and I sold it for 745. So it's just like, yes.
Yeah, almost close to doubling almost in less than 5 years.
Yeah. No, that was a real success story. I kind of predict prices are going to drop, but they might not. I mean, nobody knows the future. But I kind of wanted to be a bit more liquid. I'm also starting stuff in Montreal. I have a work colleague who's very talented at fixing stuff, so I'm trying to do a bit what you guys are doing, and in the lines of fixing up properties. So we are doing our first flip in Montreal, and we just finished it. We listed it about 2 weeks ago, and now we have an accepted offer on a house. So we're and I kind of fly solo, but this I'm doing with a partner, and I'm more the equity person. We both have a fair understanding of the real estate market, but he's more specialized in Montreal. So, and I haven't lived there since 1990, so I don't really know what pockets are good, and he's good. He's good with that, and he's very good at renovations. So he's gonna. Well, he fixed the first condo, and the other house. We don't know what we'll do with it yet, but I think the Burr strategy might be where we're gonna head.
Now, was that you mentioned to us that you had bought a crack house or a rough?
Yes.
Is that the one, or when did you buy that one, and how did that process go?
Oh, the crack house was in Vancouver. That was another emotional roller coaster. So I guess for new investors, if I have a word of caution, is I often compare real estate as driving a car, and you're being cash flow positive, and I really like using cap rates. So when I bought that property, I was just looking at the cap rate, and I thought, oh, this is a good cap rate. But I kind of got blinded to other stuff, and a little bit naive, I guess, sometimes, or trusting of people. So I got in, and that owner had multiple houses like this, and he when I bought the property, there were certain tenants, and then when I viewed the property, there were certain tenants, and then when I bought it, half the tenants had changed, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of strange. From faces I could recognize, and it turned out to be a crack house, and it took me a little while to realize, but that was definitely a nightmare. Definitely a nightmare, but I ended up turning it around, and that worked out well. So we talk again about listening to advice of not the right professional. So I knew I didn't want to run it like this, so I'm sorry. Okay, we're going to renovate it, and we're going to do student type housing. So what I did is I hired a friend of mine who's a contractor, and I told him, look, I have really rough tenants on the basement level, so we'll get those guys. We'll tell those guys we want to renovate and reclaim the space, and we'll keep the tenants upstairs, because upstairs there was not, in my mind, there weren't problems. And he's like, no, 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 you got to get rid of everybody. So we ended up asking people to leave on a written notice, and all the good tenants left. And then guess what? The bad ones, they didn't leave, and we couldn't get rid of them. So that was a big challenge, and I didn't know what to do. I was a new investor at the time, and what I ended up doing is I called the city and I said, look, what do you do if this happens? I know you have properties. So they referred me to an eviction specialist, and that was, from then on, things started going really well. So he took care of doing because at the time I didn't really know the process of doing the eviction properly. So he did the evictions the legal way, the proper way, and then we had the place vacant, and we started fixing it up, and we changed the use, and it cash flow positive. And then every time I go to this house, it felt like I was seeing friends instead of feeling like I was going to get mugged.
Well, that's a good outcome.
That was a great outcome.
Eviction specialist, that's got to be a fun job.
Oh my God. That's not my second career, I can tell you that. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us, who are some of your mentors? How did you learn for real estate investing?
One of my great mentor, his name is J.F. Tremblay, and he was actually my boss, and he hired me in the silviculture industry, and he was always fascinated by the stock market, and really good at it. So at the time, of course, he was a project manager for the reforestation company we worked together, and I didn't understand the stock market or any of this. So he started coaching me, I'm always curious, always asking questions. And then I started investing in the market, and he mentored me. And then at the time too, we read a book from Dave Chilton, The Wealthy Barber. He put me onto that. So that was one book that I really liked. And that kind of got me going and started in there. It's odd because the stock market showed me how to look at numbers in a different way. So before I was an investor, I would look like, if somebody would say, are you going to buy $1 million home? I thought, oh no, that's too expensive. But then when you start looking at key ratios, well, it doesn't matter how much you pay for your house. What matters is how much you're going to get and what's left over after. So this mentor really helped. JF really helped with fundamentals. So JF was definitely a key mentor. I also took a course with Outfit, and I'm not really sure where to classify that, as a catastrophe or really good. They were outfit that were, well, they promised you huge profits, and they wanted you to take courses, and it was courses after courses. I'm not an academic. I kind of like simple, go do. And these guys were doing foreclosures. It's all based in the States, and I also like the win-win thing. So it didn't really jive with me, but they had a few pockets of gold. And one of them, I got a series of tapes that I really, really overpaid for, but a fellow named Bernard Zick was, I never met him in person. And unfortunately, I tried to find him, but he passed away years ago. But he had these tapes, and was you'd put these in a DVD player and listen to him, and he was great. He was such a great speaker too, and he was really entertaining, motivating, and that's where I got my first idea of land assembly and change of use and looking at value in a different way. So even though I never met him, Bernard Zick would definitely be one guy I'd consider a mentor.
Yeah, I always recommend that people do, take some time to learn, right? Like, don't just jump into it. I mean, obviously you need to get around like-minded people and sort of like gravitate to something like you did those tapes. I had a very similar thing, with Jim Rohn. I got this weekend seminar. I think it was actually called the Weekend Seminar, and there was like 10 tapes one of I was buying a house private, and the lady had it sitting on her, like in just a pile of stuff that she had there. And she goes, "Oh, those were my husband. Would you want that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'll take it." And then I constantly played them for probably years.
Nice.
Until I didn't have a tape deck anymore. But yeah, no, that kind of stuff is very important. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was great. So I guess what are we doing here? We want to wrap up?
Well, what's next for you, Marc? What are you
What's next?
It's a very good question. By the way, I'm going back to mentors. I guess I consider you guys as mentors because I really like your podcast, and I really like a lot of the guests you take on are amazing. And I did take a course with what's his name? One of your fellow that does multifamily investing, Pierre-Paul Turgeon. I did the blueprint, and that guy is awesome. He's really good. And I took his course. I went to Hamilton. I love what's happening in Hamilton. It's so much opportunity. It's beautiful to watch. And I was looking at multifamily. I find that margins seems to be thin, but it's okay. It works. There's beautiful strategies, and I'm learning, and when the land assembly goes through, there's going to be a lot of opportunities, and I'm looking at multifamily. I'm also looking at I want to help my partner Lumi. I want things to work for him too. So those are two areas I'm going to focus on. And it's kind of fun to pile strategies together. So, but when you get too creative, I find the bank doesn't really like you anymore. And that's the situation I'm in. It's for example, Airbnbs can be such a great business, but the bank will say, well, we like to look at it like if you had a normal tenant in it. But really, like, for example, if I go back to Whistler can, make you 50 to 70,000 on a 1-bedroom condo. But if I had a normal tenant in there, that's gross, right? If I had a normal tenant in there, you'd be lucky to get half, maybe less than half. And the bank just wants to look at it like you have a normal tenant, and that's just hard to finance stuff. Yeah.
I see what you mean. Okay, so I guess long story short, you're looking for some multifamily opportunities, and you're going to keep on flipping in Montreal, I guess. That's the plan.
I think Montreal, from what I can see, like we had, I can see big potential in Montreal. I think a lot of international people are starting to buy, and we've seen this trend happen in Vancouver. And in Vancouver, when I moved in, things were really affordable, and with a lot of influx from international, it it brings on lots of gain in the value of properties. And my prediction is Montreal has just started to experience this. And because here in Vancouver we have now people get taxed, foreign investors get taxed, and that's put a little bit of a damper on progress. Or, well, you can't always say it's progress, because at one point, you know, it becomes very hard to afford a house for people that are not very, very wealthy. And that's in Vancouver. We're looking at, if you buy a tear down in Vancouver, you won't find anything below $1 million. Like, and that's unaffordable for a family, for example.
Yeah.
And I think Montreal is going to see big gains. So I'd like to stay in the long run too. I just haven't really found a way to do it with my partner yet, because he's got no cash. But we'll find a way. We'll find a way.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. So how can people get in touch with you then? If there's people out there that want to maybe ask you some questions, or I don't know, join forces, whatever, how can people get in touch with you?
That one of the easiest way is my Hotmail account, my email. I have multiple emails, but the one I always go back to is my name. It's Marc Robillard at hotmail.com, and it's spelled MarcRobillard at hotmail.com. Or my phone number is 250-710-5434.
That's great. And we'll put all Marc's contact stuff in the show notes. Sandy, how can people get in touch with you?
289-389-6846 or Sandy at McKayRealtyNetwork.com.
And you can reach me at rob@mrbreakthrough.ca. Well, thanks again, Marc. Really enjoyed this. There's so much to talk about. It's hard to get in depth on all of these things. You've got your hand in multiple strategies and stuff. So you definitely have a lot to share, and we appreciate everything you brought to us today. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob and Sandy. Love your show.
Thanks, Marc. Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us.